photosynthesis. And many of you probably heard of photosynthesis. It sounds like a lot of you have been introduced to photosynthesis before. Last chapter, in chapter 3, we studied the organelles where photosynthesis happens. And in this chapter, we're going to study a little bit more detail about exactly what happens in photosynthesis. We learned that photosynthesis happens in the chloroplasts of cells in plants and other creatures that use the sunlight's energy. Also in chapter 4, we're going to take a look at respiration. Respiration is using the energy, using the glucose and the ATP that is produced during photosynthesis to release energy. And we're also going to study mitosis, which is how cells reproduce themselves for a number of reasons, not just for growth, but also for repair and other things. So we're going to take a detailed look at how cells reproduce themselves. Photosynthesis. I'd like you to memorize this formula. This is a chemical reaction, and it's the chemical reaction that happens inside the chloroplasts. So write this down. 6 CO2. What's CO2? Carbon dioxide. Good. 6 water molecules. When those two molecules join together, carbon dioxide and water, something magic happens in the presence of light. Sugar is produced, and that sugar is C6H12O6. And as you guys demonstrated at the very beginning of class, you already know what that sugar is called. It is called what? Glucose. Good. And of course, being a green plant, it also produces oxygens. 6 oxygen molecules, in fact. So carbon dioxide is needed for plants to do photosynthesis. Where does that carbon dioxide come from, do you think? Yeah, Joe?
It comes from the atmosphere.
Good. It comes from the atmosphere. And in the atmosphere, where does the CO2 come from the atmosphere? Izzy, do you know where the CO2 comes from in the atmosphere? Okay. Yeah.
Animals and from different forms.
Excellent. So, good. So, animals, as well as plants, because plants do respiration too, CO2 comes from respiration. The biggest source of CO2 these days, one of the biggest sources, is human production. CO2 also comes from volcanoes, from the oceans, and other sources. Yeah, my question. Okay. Yeah. If you, I would like you to know, so the question is, do we have to draw the picture? I would like you to know where each of these chemicals comes from, and the picture helps. So, yeah, you might draw a sketch of this picture. It's a great picture, by the way. So, carbon dioxide comes to the plant from the atmosphere, and it goes into the plant. Where does the water come from? In the reactants side over here on the left, that water. Yeah. From the roots, yeah. And where do the roots get it? Where do the roots get it? Zoe. Where do the roots get the water? From the ground? Yeah, but where's the ground get it? From runoff, from rain, from underground sources. Okay, good. Joe?
Technically,
ultimately. Yeah. Okay, so in the presence of light, so this doesn't happen in the darkness. In the presence of light, when those two things join together, it produces sugar, glucose sugar, and oxygen. As we mentioned at the beginning of class, that sugar is, once it's produced in the chloroplasts, it's transported all over the plant to power the energy that's needed in every cell of the plant, all the way down to the roots, through the stem, through the trunk, and so on. Oxygen is released as a byproduct. And that oxygen, even though it's a byproduct to the plant, it's essential for us, right? Because we breathe that oxygen. Yeah, Michael?
Actually, at night, the plant takes in oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide.
That's true. At nighttime, the plant does the reverse of photosynthesis, which is respiration. We'll get to that. Good observation. Okay. So in the chloroplasts organelles of the cell, and do you remember the Eladia cells that you looked at? Okay. You saw all the chloroplasts in the Eladia cells, and what color were they? Green, that's right. Does anybody remember the name of the pigment that's inside chloroplasts? What's the name of the pigment? What's the name of the pigment? Yeah, Conrad. Chlorophyll, yeah. So that green chlorophyll pigment is making the chloroplast green and the cells green and the leaf green. So who remembers, to be green, what has to happen to the wavelengths of light? For something to be green, the wavelengths of light, tell me about the wavelengths of light for something to be green. Ian, say it louder. Okay, shorter wavelengths. What else? Joe?
It would have to absorb everything but green and blue.
Good. So it would have to absorb all the other colors except for green and reflect. Now, do you think, is green a primary color? No. So, are there other colors embedded in green? You think we could prove that? Yeah, and we're going to prove that today in lab. Okay, let's move on one more slide. Autotroph. Autotroph, this is a vocab word you're going to need to know. Auto means self. Troph means feeding. So these are self-feeders. They get their energy from sunlight and inorganic molecules, such as sulfates. They get their food from sunlight and inorganic molecules, such as sulfates. Now, another word for food is energy. They get their energy from the sun. They convert the sunlight's energy into molecular energy. Okay? And when we eat plants, we get some of that energy. Yeah. Okay? And here's a nice apple tree. We just harvested our apple tree. We got a whole gigantic box full of apples, and we're juicing them right now and making pies and apple crisp, and oh, it's so good. It wouldn't make it out of my house. The apple pie wouldn't make it past the front door. Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, Joe.
You need to make apple cider. That's really good.
Yeah. We're going to make wassail. Anybody ever have wassail? Wassail is apple juice with spices and cinnamon and nutmeg. It's super good. Okay, I think that's enough for today. Let's do a lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, make a lab entry.